The caterhamracer.com Season 5 Championship is sponsored by Just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights and accessories for the Caterham 7. By design and display structures, immerse yourself in worlds beyond with bespoke projection screens. And by DPR Motorsport, your competitive advantage. And also with additional support from Darren Burke, Performance Driver Coach. It's quite a poignant way to start the stream, isn't it? Given the recent events of the last few days, given particularly motorsport. And of course, the only way whilst motorsport is hurting a bit right now, the only way we can get over it, and I'm sure that the poor Marshall, who very sadly lost their life at Brands Hatch just a few days ago, and we want us to do, is to carry on in his honour and to do the one thing that we do best, which is, whether it be virtual or real, to continue to go racing. And that's exactly what we're doing here tonight. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to more action from caterhamracer.com from the Season 5 Championship. It's been a while, over a month since we had our last rounds at Silverstone Grand Prix, where quite a bit's happened recently, but particularly the latest rounds of the Caterham Motorsport package. And of course, we are getting set now for what is essentially the second half of the season. We've had a bit of a mid-summer break of over a month, but now we're back to racing in real this weekend at Brands Hatch on the 7th and 8th of August. So we're on the Indy circuit, the same circuit which is being used once again. Scott Woodwison and Chris Cutchison in the commentary box here. And Chris, before of course we get to racing here, it's been bit of a tough few days of motorsport, and one which I know that the whole community, both not just in the UK, but everyone as far as Europe and as quite far around the world is reaching, and the effects of Brands Hatch still feeling very much being felt around motorsport since what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody, and yeah, as for on behalf of all drivers, I guess, thank you to Marshalls and all you do for us to allow us to go racing. We did see some horrific stuff at Brands Hatch. And there's not a lot to say about that other than, we appreciate everything you do for us to allow us to do our sport, and it's just such a terrible set of events. But we race on, and like you say, it does show how much appreciation there is there. All the drivers, even including Formula One drivers, reaching out and giving their support. And so, bravo to all the Orange Army, and thank you for everything you do. But we are here with our virtual racing, and and things do go on. We are out racing for real next weekend at Brands Hatch, and I know there will be a different feel, but equally, I think there's some positivity that we can take from that as well.
Yeah, just to kind of wrap up the point on the Marshals, there's one point I always try to make whenever thanking the Marshals, which is, to me, all Marshals are brilliant, but in particular for me, Marshals in this country, in the UK, for me, are the best in the world, because they get trained to a high standard, they are always professional, they always do an incredible job, and they always deliver to the highest standard, regardless of it being the British Grand Prix or a club race weekend like we have coming up at Brands Hatch. So again, as it says in the hashtag at the top right corner, massive thank you to every single Marshal that does, and just not just Marshals, but all volunteers who give up their what could be a free weekend for them to help race events for real go racing, because it really isn't a phrase which is overstated or overhyped at all when we say without volunteers, genuinely, motorsport in general pretty much couldn't happen at all, because all these volunteers are incredibly valuable, and they're incredibly special, and they really are the lifeblood of what makes motorsport tick, both on and in many cases off the track as well. So massive thank you. And you happen to be a Marshal watching, again, just know that we love you guys, and of course we're thinking of all of you guys, particularly that you've lost one of your fellow marshalling friends and colleagues, and of course everyone is obviously feeling the pain, but the only way we know how to get over it is to race on and to carry on. So let's bring the mood up a little bit, and let's look forward to what hopefully should be a fantastic evening's esports racing Caterham style. Now let's quickly recap with the calendar in terms of where we've been. It's been a pretty frantic first half of the season. It follows the real life Caterham Motorsport calendar, so we started all the way, seems like ages ago, back in April, the end of April, Donington National with the Caterham Academy cars. We then followed up with a trip to Scotland and to Knock Hill, which was a brilliant trip in real life with some fabulous racing across the border. And our last rounds that we had, both in real life and in esports, was on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit for our first experience of 3 this year for the Caterham 420Rs. And we have to say, Chris, given what happened, particularly in the second race, towards the end of the closing stages between main title rivals and, ironically, DPR teammates, Christian Cerruto and David Rowe, whether or not there's going to be a turning point in the points table is going to be quite key. We'll see the championship standings here. Now, this shows you the scores overall, in terms of overall points scored from the start of the season to where we are now. And David Rowe on overall points leads the way by 8, 286 to Zaruta's 278. Steve McMaster only just behind on 275. Then it's Tom McEwen on 268 and Andrew Parker on 265. What that points table doesn't show you is where they are on drop scores. When it gets to drop scores, Rowe and Zaruta are dead level. They both have 2 wins each, but it is David Rowe who leads by virtue of having more second places with 3 to his name this season. So he leads. Steve McMaster on drop scores then comes to joint 3rd place with Tom McEwen, and Andy Parker's a further 3 points back. So 13 points separates the top 5 drivers, and Silverstone, Chris, really could be seen as a turning point, particularly in how close this championship really is becoming.
Yeah, well, Zaruta's actually taken 3 wins this season now, and so in that respect, he's looking strong, but he doesn't have the consistency. And as you said, in Silverstone, there was a last sort of lap issue between him and Dave, and he actually ended up dropping back to 4th. So that kind of was quite costly as far as the total championship points. But like I say, when we go on to drop scores, all of those kind of the missed rounds and that kind of 4th place don't count for anything because they get dropped, and therefore, yeah, it's all dead even. And Christian Schroeter's definitely got an air about him. Certainly, he was able to set a pace in pre-quali that no one else could quite match. And basically, the times you're looking for, you can see at the times with 4 minutes left to go, Schroeter is out front with a 51.5 lap, and that is just a bit slower than the ultimate lap pace, where we see people dipping into the 0.4s very occasionally. But you can see how close McMaster is following, 58 hundredths of a second, and then David Rowe's only 69 hundredths behind. So everything is incredibly close, and you can see Parker's just moved himself up there into 4th place.
Yeah, again, I should correct myself. You're absolutely right, because Zaruta does have 3 wins, which means the fact that even though it is tied on points, and even though when you look on the caterhamracer.com website, it's Rowe in front, by virtue of count back on wins, it should be Zaruta.
That's my bad programming, Scott.
I wasn't going to say anything of the sort, Chris. Don't be silly. No, it's if you look at the results, by virtue of count back of wins, by kind of the count back we obviously have in motorsport, Zaruta essentially is the leader, 3 wins to 2. Although if it was going back on second places, like I thought originally when it was equal on wins for Rowe and Zaruta with 2 each, at the time I thought he would have been Rowe leading with 3 second places. But we'll get into the nuances of points as the season continues to go on. So qualifying session here in virtue with 3.25 minutes to go. Christian Zaruta, you should say, leads the way at the moment in this session by a mere margin of 58 1,000ths of a second. That's pretty much a typical Caterham finish in many races, that gap. And then it's McMaster second, David Rowe third. Andy Parker has now closed the gap a little bit more, so we now have the top 4 separated. Well, we did have the top 4 separated by less than a tenth of a second until Christian Zaruta did that, 51.459, to extend his pole margin by to almost a tenth and a half. Chris Skillicorn's looking good tonight so far, or just under 2 tenths off the pole time at the moment, and he was in the mix there as well, just a few fractions behind. It would have been pretty much the top 5 had Zaruta not set that time, get himself in the mix. Now Steve Arnell gets even closer as well, so even in this close point of the session, on a circuit like this, it's only 1.2 miles. It's pretty much a speed bowl, very quick, lots of elevation changes, but it's always an entertaining circuit to drive on, as much as it being quite a challenge at circuits like Paddock Hill Bend, particularly through the fast left-hander of Surtees. This is a circuit where pretty much every single corner, as you do with many laps, but particularly at Brands Hatch, you really do have to nail every single corner to keep the rhythm and the momentum going all the way through from the start of lap right the way through to the finish.
Yeah, let's try and ride on board here with Paul Donkin, Caterham racer, and he's also raced other things as we go into Paddock Hill Bend. It's how late do you lean on the brakes? You want to carry as much speed as you can, just clip the apex, and then you want to use all this exit. Actually, Paul can use a bit more of that, and we brake about at the bridge here, so we brake really hard into Druids Bend. Hug the inside there, but you don't want to actually go over the curb, it's pretty rough. Let the car drift out, bit of oversteer there as he gets on the power. Maybe grab a gear and back down again for Graham Hill. It's really tricky to actually hook up this whole bend and not go out too wide. He's staying respectfully within track limits. It's really good to see. Surtees, you want to go flat out in and then just ease off the power to get over the curb. Back on the power, flat out, ready to pick your braking point. Let the hill take off the speed, tuck in towards that apex. And in the virtual world, we kind of keep the car a lot tighter to this apex than we will in real life. In real life, we drift off all the way out to the outside on the left as we come up here to the line. A nice tidy lap there by Paul Donkin. Is it going to improve his time? It takes him to 7th place.
Yeah, so a little bit further up into the top 10, into the top half of the field. We're expecting 17 cars racing tonight. You can see there's 17 cars at the time. Chris Skillicorn, meanwhile, has just popped in the second fastest time and promptly throws it into the gravel at Paddock Hill Bend after he does. It's probably even surprised him with how quick he was. He's now still about a tenth and a half off, but he's only fractionally gone quicker than Steve McMaster. So the fact that we've got, I mean, look at the whole field. The whole field is literally covered by just over 3/4 of a second. The top 10, in fact, covered by 3.5 tenths. And to go to even more time-based gaps, it's pretty much just under half a second covers the top 12 out of the 17 cars. So I suspect not only does this show, one, how evenly matched the field is becoming as they get closer and closer, two, how fine the margins are on a circuit like this, particularly how small it is, being 1.2 miles on the Indy circuit, but also three, given how close it is in lap time between the entire field, we could be in for two genuinely sensational races here with how close everyone is tonight.
It could go two ways, couldn't it, Scott? It could be sensational or it could be a catastrophe. You can see even right at the back here, Jason Knight, Alan Curtis absolutely flying, trying to outdo each other, but ending up with exactly the same time. So brilliant show by everyone on the whole grid, all the way down, up and down. Like you say, it's an unbelievable fact that they're under a second between the the 17, 18 drivers that we've got going around tonight.
Jason Knight then will hug the pit wall, heads down cross lines, trying to improve his time, which he does improve his time, moves up to 16th. He was level on time with Alan Curtis, but couldn't quite go any higher than the 8th row of the grid. Christian Zaruta has pitted in, and he's decided that he's done enough to maintain his pole position, as has, it seems, as though David Rowe. He's decided to finish up his session. Chris Skillicorn's going for one final effort as he comes towards the start-finish line to finish off his lap time. And he does not improve. He crosses the line, and in fact, might have been an out lap for him, given the fact there was no time on the screen going on the right-hand side. So, first of two 50-minute races for tonight, then, which sees the grid line up like this as the result of qualifying. So Christian Zaruta takes pole position by 0.134 of a second from Chris Skillicorn, from him as one of his best qualifying results to date in Caterham Racer. He will start on the front row of the grid. Steve McMaster and David Rowe, fellow championship rivals to Christian Zaruta, will be on row 2 together. Then it's Andrew Parker, who Chris was telling me before the stream, has been doing about 1 million laps on the service to try and keep on improving, and he has been making steady improvement. It's all that work with Darren Burke that's helping. He's now starting 5th. Alongside him is Steve Arnell on the 3rd row of the grid, and then Paul Donkin and Tom McEwing ahead of Richard Gallagher and Guy Crawford. Some drivers who you might not expect to be in the top 10 and that as high as they are, particularly like Tom McEwing and Paul Donkin, making some progress. 6th row of the grid sees John Lang and Jamie Peters-Ennis in his new white new Pride livery, which is the white car with the rainbow stripes, looking pretty slick there in 12th position. Tom Willis, not so happy with 13th place, I imagine, alongside James Fowler in 14th. Paul Ferneff, again, also struggling, down in 15th place on the 8th row of the grid alongside Jason Knight, who we saw improve earlier on. And then Alan Curtis rounds out what should be the 9th row of the grid. We were expecting Michael Coomber, but no time set for him, so either he will start for the back of the grid or will be a non-starter. So, countdown is on before we start gridding the cars up for our first of 2 races tonight here for this 4th event of the season for caterhamracer.com, season 5. And the way it's grown pretty quickly all the way through has been pretty substantial, given the fact that we started pretty much as a series all the way in the original lockdown back in roughly, I think it was April, May time we started. And then it went through to the seasons that we did. We had a couple of the seasons that we had in terms of the series that we had in terms of the Americas tours, and also a couple of the different circuits that we ran around as well. So it's going to be quite fascinating to see how these guys tackle it. Of course, if you want to watch Caterham Racing for real this weekend, all the action is being live streamed both on the Caterham social media channels and YouTube channel, Facebook page and YouTube channel, and also through the BRSEC YouTube and Facebook pages. So make sure you go and like, subscribe, and hit the notifications buttons on all of those mediums to make sure that you get notified when things go live. First race then, all the championship contenders are within the top 4 positions, Chris. It might be a bit of a daunting question to ask, but what can we anticipate from this first row here? Is it going to be the top 3 trying to get top 3 of the top points, trying to get amongst themselves early on at the front, or are the likes of possibly Andy Parker, Chris Skillicorn and co are they going to start to make it difficult, but given that they are in amongst them, to try and make it tricky to try and get in their way to steal points from them?
What we've seen is if it's really dependent on the early corners as to whether they let someone like a Christian Chiarita disappear off if there's a gap that's been generated. We have seen David Rowe here fourth, which is a little bit further back than he might want to do, and Parker back. We talked about Willis being right at the back of the field, but we often see he doesn't qualify too well, but then absolutely flies through the race. So watch out for Willis coming through. So it'll be very much early corners as to whether Christian can get away or whether Skillicorn can get off the line. Here come the lights.
Well, the outside of the front row tends to be the flatter part of the circuit, so watch for Skillicorn from the front row. But Christian Chiarita, looking to try and redeem himself from his finish from Silverstone. Race 1 of the evening here on the Brands Hatch Indy circuit. Season 5 of caterhamracer.com is all underway, and immediately get proven wrong. It was a good start for Chiarita from pole position. Not such a good start with lots of wheel spin from Chris Skillicorn from the front row, but he does maintain second as they head into Paddock Hill Bend for the first time. Chiarita leads it then with a clear gap. Second place to Skillicorn. It's side by side for third. There's already contact in the background. Both John Lang and Guy Crawford have come to blows. They're right towards the tail of the field. They're 3 abreast behind in the top 10. That was Steve Arnell having a scrap there with, I think, Paul Donkin and Tom McEwing. So lots going on between them as they head into the left-hand at Raven Hill Bend for the first time. They run wide over the curve, down the short straight towards 30s. It is Chiarita who leads. Skillicorn in second place, then a small gap to third, with the rest of the train being led by Steve McMaster. Andy Parker's fourth, and David Rowe not having the greatest of starts, but he qualified in fourth on the grid. He's down to fifth already, Chris. He's got some work to do to try and get himself up from the bottom of the top 5, particularly with the chasing back behind looking pretty hungry already at the end of lap 1.
Yeah, 15 minutes isn't long in a race, but you do need to be a little bit patient at the front here and just let the race come to you sometimes to make sure that it all settles down. We can see that Chiarita and Skillicorn have got a tiny gap there back to McMaster, but McMaster's proved time and time again that he's got the pace and can bring people back. Andrew Parker looking really aggressive at the start of this race, looking very racy with David Rowe. He's already gone past David Rowe and looking like he might well be looking at McMaster next. And behind, the sort of train is slightly sort of fragmenting, but we've got people like Gallagher and Arnell all looking to keep their fingernails stuck in there as Ennis there is just waggling his tail out the back of Graham Hill.
Yeah, holding station nicely in 10th position. A little bit of no man's land at the moment, but he's got a small gap to try and make up to the rest of the train in front of him. Now for third place, I've just noticed, Andy Parker has managed to muscle his way past Steve McMaster, so he will get himself in front, but he might find McMaster coming back at him on the outside line on the sprint down the pit straight and up the hill over the crest toward Paddock Hill Bend. Parker takes the line, turns into the right-hander down the hill, and he holds on. And now look at the way David Rowe has already just arrived onto the tail of McMaster as they go up Halewood Hill, under the bridge and into Druids for the third time. So 15-minute race, and already we have on the third lap, we haven't even completed 2 and a bit minutes. So we're going to get quite a few laps here tonight. Change on just in further back between Alan Curtis and Paul Fernhoff. That's for 13th position. Now the front few cars starting to spread out a little bit as Chiarita has now a gap of almost a second. And we talk about in Assetto Corsa, the sim that we use for caterhamracer.com. The magic gap that you want is under half a second, because if you get under half a second to the car in front, and then you get the advantage of the toe from these cars. And notoriously Caterhams do put on pretty big toes. They punch quite a hole in the air with quite a blunt sort of stubby front end of these cars, which means they do punch quite a large hole, which means you get quite a large slipstream, and that's what makes them so close and exciting to watch. Chiarita in clear air with the fastest lap of the race, 51.649, and already having a gap of say 9/10 per second. So, but it looks though at the moment in these last couple of moments, Chris, that Chiarita's gap hasn't really gone out too much more, and that with the pack behind, with being led by Chris Skillicorn, they are just about keeping him in touch. And if they are losing time, it's not by much per lap, which might give them a bit of confidence maybe later on in the race they can start to work together a bit better in these next couple of tours.
Yeah, even though I said he had, Christian had an advantage over everyone, he does, but only, half a tenth. It's very little, but nevertheless, that will feel like quite a good gap for him, because he can actually protect and run his own line. He doesn't have to worry about being attacked from the behind, and that's the biggest thing about Caterhams and their toe. If you have to protect your line, then obviously you're costing yourself time, but he has got enough of a gap that he can run his own line and be safe, knowing that he can hit his marks and off he goes. So he's going to be fairly comfortable with that. But we do regularly see at Brands Hatch, Andrew Parker there really making some good progress and looking like Skillicorn is next in his sights, very much so. For maybe in the next couple of laps we'll see him ahead. But yeah, Brands Hatch, we often see cars spread out but then come back together again as battles develop. It holds the whole train up, and you see big trains thing. Parker here on a really good line, Skillicorn having to defend, so that's not going to help his speed as he's running running wide. You can see that Parker up the inside here going into Surtees. It's really tight there. Sorry, not Surtees, Clearways. Really tight there, but he has got the inside run, Scott.
Yeah, the key thing for Parker is that I suspect possibly Skillicorns just let him have it a bit there to try and get through to avoid any contact. He had to make that happen to try and chase after Christian Zaruta. What he doesn't need is this man, Steve McMaster, trying to go up the inside. There was a small bit of contact in the rear of Parker's car, which pushes him wide through Paddock Hill Bend. It brings Skillicorns to the mix again, with 3 abreast up the hill towards Druids, with McMaster's caught in the middle. Parker's round the outside of everyone and says, not on your life, guys. I'm going to hold on to second place and try and chase after the leader. It's now 3rd for Skillicorn, 4th for McMaster. McMaster has a look up the inside into Graham Hill Bend. Can't get it done, but all this has now brought David Rowe back into play in 5th position. There's a chance he could recover himself a podium. But the trouble we've seen so many times, both in real racing and in caterhamracer.com, is that the harder that the cars in the pack behind will either fight each other, the easier it is for the car in front to make a break. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Already, about a lap and a half ago, the gap was about roughly just over a second. It's now gone out to 3.2 because of all the battles we've got going on. Case in point, the scrap is on for 4th between Steve McMaster and David Rowe. They head into Druids and David Rowe doesn't hesitate to dive up the inside and make the pass for 4th position. McMaster will try and get him back on the exit, which he does, almost pulls level, but again decides to slot back in. And also look at Tom McEwing, is looking pretty racy. Just behind them, we've got Paul Donkin in the grey car there in 7th position. Steve Varnell is 8th. And it's Richard Gallagher, and just at the back of this queue, you just saw at the top of the shot, there was Jamie Peters-Ennis in the bottom of the top 10, but doing well to keep these cars relatively in touch and trying to use some of the clear air that he's got around him to get a little bit closer and try and get amongst the fight in these next couple of laps.
Yeah, just look how everyone's closed into one long line again. As that battle developed, it let Christian get away, but it's closed everybody else up. McMaster's move looking strangely familiar to me back to 2017 there, but he looked like he actually let Parker have that place back, but I think Parker would have had taken it anyway. He did a great move around the outside, and we see some really good opportunistic moves from David Rowe as well here, as he looks like he might be trying to make another move here on Skillicorn. He's got the overlap up the inside there going up the hill, so I think he'll have got this done into Druids.
Yeah, put a nice undercut there to get him back on the corner exit. Now that Rowe's got through, I think Skillicorn was almost in danger of leaving the door open for McMaster to be invited up the inside, but that has given David Rowe a podium position, which he really does need to keep himself in touch with Christian Zaruta, given the fact that Christian now has got away by about 3.6, 3.7 seconds to the good in the lead. And still the top 10 stays as it is. Just quick note to the cars outside the top 10. Tom Willis is 11th ahead of James Fowler and Paul Fernerhuff. Then it's Alan Curtis, Jason Knight, and then we did notice that Guy Crawford, who'd had that spin at the beginning of the race, hasn't really moved much further than 16th position, so not a great night so far just in the beginning for Guy, but hopefully he can recover and get a better start in race 2 to be amongst the pack to make his way through.
It's such a hard track to overtake at, Scott. If you drop places like that, it's so difficult to get it back. We've seen a couple of really good moves by David Rowe, but it's, that's taken him 4 or 5 laps to get that done, and by then you're dropping further and further back. What's
intriguing is that Andy Park has now started to be the next one to break the chain from the cars behind, because he's now got a 1.1 second advantage, but that said, he's not really been able to make any inroads on Zaruta's lead. Zaruta set another new fastest lap of the race last time by, so even in clear air, the pace is still strong enough for Christian to keep on pumping in faster lap after faster lap to pull the gap away. So either Parker needs a mistake, or he really needs to find a little bit extra within him to dig deep and to try and pull that gap back in. The next move that's brewing now could be this one for 3rd position, because Skillicorn wants to try and recover it, David Rowe wants to try and defend it as they come down through Paddock Hill Bend again. We've got Steve McMaster in 5th position, and then there's a good scrap that might be developing soon for 6th, 7th and 8th, which is between Tom McEwing, Paul Donkin and Steve Varnell. Just 3 cars at the back of this 6-pack of cars. They've head into Paddock Hill, into Graham Hill Bend again with 6.5 minutes to go. And they're all running wide on the exit. That really didn't help David Rowe, who's all over the place. He's sideways and just about gathers it back together again. He was all over the shop and managed to get it going once more. And the fact he's possibly did that whilst he was quite high in the gears meant he lost all momentum, lost all speed. Quick flick down the paddle shifts, I'm sure, on David Rowe's car, but he's dropped all the way down to 10th, and that will be a disaster for him, particularly when he's got to try and get himself as many points as he can to stop Zaruta from running away. Now that drop scores are coming into play, he will probably certainly use this, depending where he finishes one of his drop scores, But if you can try and get some better points, you might well try to help him, particularly if he has to rely on bringing that score back later on, if he has a worse time in the next few rounds coming up.
It's such a shame. He was having a really good race. He's now dropped back to right down to the end of the top 10. You got Jamie Peterson just behind him there. I think he drifted wide outside of Graham Hill, which loosened the rear end, and I think he might have got a time penalty, which is why he had to slow down, and we saw that extra bit of slowdown. So really did scupper his race. That one taking too much liberty. We see the drivers taking too much down there compared to a real life. It kind of back to the rules of 2013-ish, where the track limits rules were different. But yeah, if you take too much liberty, you will lose the rear end, and that's what happened. So after a really good start to the race, that's all gone to pot now. But the battle at the front, we've got Christian and Andrew Parker out there out front. But this is really heating up with McMaster now ahead of Skillicorn there. I think that issue might have cost Skillicorn a place.
Yeah, just Dr. Palmer's track limits seem to be as strict as they are in the sim as they are in real life, because of course if that was a penalty for a slowdown penalty with David Rowe, he had to take that pretty quickly. So certainly being caught by the virtual eye of the stewards. Steve McMaster, you're absolutely right, as everyone tries to go a little bit wide on the exit of Graham Hill Bend and the short straight towards Surtees. He's now feeling that pressure for third position from Chris Skillicorn with McEwing, Donkin and Arnell. And these are guys who, all with due respect to them, aren't usually ones that are challenging for either a podium place or a top 5 position usually in the past, but they've managed to get themselves a little bit lucky either for some drivers either that would usually be here that are not in the race, or for those who are simply just having a bad race so far. Not having such a bad race though, I mean, it is McMaster, but he's under threat. Steve Arnell puts the fastest lap of the race in 51.514. That's the benefit of a tow, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great time. Yeah, you do get that tow, like we said, and you're seeing make him move up the inside of Donkin down here. Donkin drifted very wide up there, so Arnell's made that stick. Yep, you definitely get a nice little boost from the tow, but obviously you've got to time it well, because if you don't, especially when you're a pack of cars like these guys are, then you just catch up and they've got nowhere to go. Donkin now fighting back. He took that wider line out of the Graham Hill and looks like he's fighting out. But now Arnell's the filling in the sandwich, so he's got to try and push on an attack from in front of him, but he's also got to now keep an eye on his mirrors to protect in the defence.
So just 3 3/4 minutes to go, and Arnell's starting to make some progress here. As we said, we've just seen him make the move on Paul Donkin, put him up to 6th position. Try and close up now and get himself into the top 5 if he can, at the expense of Tom McEwen as they turn once again. A little wide there through the apex of the corner. There was Chris Skillicorn. He's going to come under threat from Tom, who is set to be one of next year's Academy drivers. He was due to race this year, but changed his plans. Oh, there's been contact! Forget about that for a second. Tom McEwing's tagged the back of Chris Skillicorn, looks like, in the middle of the apex at Druids. And through all of that has come Steve Arnell into 4th position. Steve McMaster has been allowed to escape up the road now by a couple more seconds. So top 3 are pretty much on their own. Unless McMaster can close back in the next 3 minutes, I can see the top 3 pretty much being, touch wood, this order. And David Rowe, after his mistake, is up to 6th position again. He's got past both Skillicorn and McEwing after their collective mistakes, after their contact at Druids. Richard Gallagher's also getting involved here, and now I think Chris Skillicorn wants to try or Tom McEwing's trying to get back past Chris Skillicorn to come down the pit straight here, but they're all in David Rowe's tow as they come down back towards Paddock Hill Bend. This is 2.5 minutes to go now as they turn into the right hand and plunging downhill, and McEwing's trying to go back up the inside again of Chris Skillicorn. Remember what happened last time, you two? Don't try it again this time. Under brakes into the right hander. They're still getting quite close, and McEwing's looking again. He still makes contact once more. They're side by side. The exit. Oh, they've touched again. This time they both survive it just about in front of a rather bemused Richard Gallagher, I'm sure. But David Rowe back up to 6th position. And unless he can, given the pace, he might well still even catch the battle for 4th. Because if he can do that, Chris, that'll be ultimate damage limitation for the fact that Christian is several seconds up the road in the lead with 2 minutes to go. If he can catch the battle for 4th and pass them both in these last couple of laps, that will certainly be the best worst case scenario from this race, won't it? Yeah,
only 2 minutes to go. I think he might have his work cut out unless they make a mistake. I think this is probably where he's going to end up, but even that seemed unlikely a couple of laps ago. I think complete innocent, well, not innocent. I don't think he deliberately hit the back end of Skillicorn's car with McEwing, but it did cause the incident, and he did exactly what we ask our drivers to do, which is to wait for the person you've knocked off to rejoin, and that's exactly what happened. But that did allow then David Rowe to skip past them all, and we see a real battle now between Skillicorn, who's really lost out in all of that, and then Gallagher, and then Jamie Peterson is still hanging on in there. He's done a great consistent job. He just hasn't been able to push on forward, but I think he knew his pace wasn't going to be quite here coming into it, so he'll probably be satisfied at the moment that he's still in with the battle.
He's done well to keep himself in a consistent top 10 spot as Christian Zaruta, just to make the point a bit further. So it's another new fastest lap of the race, but it's in a 51.464 if he wasn't fast enough. So he's going to get, I think, this and one more lap he's on. So 1.5 laps to go. We go on board with Jamie Peters-Ellis. He's up through the sequential gearbox, looking to the outside of Tom McEwing, who slipped down to 7th after his initial contact as he let through Tom McEwing. And now he's behind Richard Gallagher, who he's lost out to. He's down to 9th, and Jamie might well steal a place higher in the top 10 if he can find a way around them. Meanwhile, David Rowe has got past both Steve and Paul Donkin, so even that was a crystal ball move, Chris Hutchinson. Already was coincidental that David was that quick. Now we see Tom McEwen just arriving round the outside, making the point that he wants to take up another position from Paul Donkin. He looks round the outside at Surtees. Might see the couple of cars behind this because they were side by side heading into Surtees. McEwen's going to try. Arnell's going to try and get back onto the tail of David Rose to come onto the pit straight, but David Rose done it into fourth position, and it must have been, like you said, Chris, simply just an instant or possible kind of a move between the pair of them that didn't quite come off between Arnell and McEwen, and because of that, and Donkin, excuse me, not McEwen. As a result of that, job done. He's into fourth for the time being again as we go on to the final lap here for this first race at Brands Hatch. It's
got to be a mistake, surely. The gap was far too big to just come across there by skill alone, I'm sure. But nevertheless, yeah, what a great result for Rowe. He must be smiling all over. But Arnell obviously still there attacking him. But yeah, here comes Christian around the final bend for what has been a pretty dominant win.
Certainly won't do his championship charge any harm. His fourth win of the season in Season 5, and he will once again weave in delight across the line. It is a fourth win of the season for Christian Zaruta as he takes the first victory tonight at Brands Hatch. Second to Andy Parker. He's got to be overjoyed with that. And third for Steve McMaster. It's like buses, isn't it, for Parker? Waits for one podium, two come along at once. Fourth for David Rowe after his fight back from his mistake earlier on. Fifth for Steve Arnell. Sixth for Tom McEwing. Seventh for Paul Donkin. Eighth for Richard Gallagher. Ninth for Tom Willis. And Chris Skillicorn dropped that even further in the pack towards the end. So he was outside the top 10 because James Fowler comes 10th. Ahead of Paul Ferdinand, Guy Crawford, who recovers back to 12th. And Jamie Peters-Ellis was down in 13th. So I suspect, I don't want to put two and two together too much, but Skillicorn and Peters-Ellis were together pretty much in 13th, at 9th and 10th at the time. I suspect there's been a bit of tete-a-tete between both of them in the closing stages, down in 13th and 14th position. But let's quickly recap the results then. So Christian Zaruta, once again, fourth win of the season. And does it, and once again, at quite a margin, 6.4 seconds. Very un-Caterham-like, but very, very caterhamracer.com-like, as we've seen that before many times in the past. Andy Parker, again, delighted, I'm sure, with another second place. That progress is certainly making making plenty of impact, all the training he's getting and all the support he's got from Darren Burke, performance driver coach. Steve McMaster, we're back on the podium once more. David Rowe, again, does the ultimate damage limitation and does manage to work his way back up to fourth after his earlier spin. Steve Arnell takes a strong top 5 ahead of Tom McEwing in 6th, who could have wished for more, ahead of Paul Donkin. Richard Gallagher in a bit of a lonely race in 8th, he was towards the back, fighting in the back of the top 10 towards the end. Tom Willis is 9th, and James Fowler round out the top 10. I suspect because they not their efforts at all, but they inherited those from those who dropped down outside the top 10. Paul Ferdinand have 11th, Guy Crawford 12th, and I suspect there was some contact or something happened between both Chris Skillicorn and Jamie Peters-Ellis because they were 9th and 10th going, I think, into the last lap, and then find themselves finishing 13th and 14th. Interesting. After that, Alan Curtis, Jason Knight, and John Lang. As we said, Michael Coomber, I think, did try 2 laps, so I think if I'm correct. But then if he did take the start, only lasted a couple of laps before retiring.
But he'll be in the next race. He'll maybe come from the back. But we said about Willis, and he started, what was it, down in 17th or something like that, or 16th maybe. But anyway, 9th is a great result, and we've seen other people moving up there like Fernie Hoff. So the consistency does count. Those contacts did definitely cost. And like you said, there was even some off camera that we obviously didn't see where, Donkin and Arnell obviously dropped back behind Rowe. And then, right at the end there, Skillicon and Peters-Ellis.
So this is going to be interesting now because Andy Parker now assumes a front row starting spot. Now, whether or not he can... remember, he started in 3rd on the grid for the first race. He's now alongside in the front row. And as I mentioned just at the start before, I was immediately proven wrong by Chris Skillicorn, whether it was just a bad start for Chris or it's not the elevation of the Brands Hatch circuit isn't quite exactly the same as in the Assetto Course version as it is in the real life version of Brands Hatch. But the the outside of the front row, the first couple of rows, it's a flatter surface for the cars to start on. So typically, and I've seen it several times before at Brands Hatch in real life, the outside of the front row typically can be a better place to start. So not having pole position but getting second on the grid can actually be a bit of a blessing in disguise, because you can get a slightly better run off the line, courtesy of that flatter patch of tarmac that you can get away from. So I think given that Chris Skillicon couldn't quite manage it, and Andy Parker's been getting quicker and quicker with his starts, Christian Zeruta, of course, is no slouch when it comes to starting himself. But do you think potentially that then Andy might have a good chance of challenging Christian in the first couple of corners if he can get a clean start away?
Yeah, no, absolutely. He started on 5th on the grid from the original race, so 5th to 2nd. Yeah, it's a brilliant result. And in real life, we say that 4th place is the best place to start. But we, in real Caterhams, we go side by side. So you'll see that where Andrew is pretty much where 4th place is on the grid. So yeah, I think he's in a really good spot. And if you watch on the start here, you'll see the cars at the back, the rear end of their cars will drift down the hill. They'll have a bit of a slide on when they get off the line. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. Even in the sim, it happens. So yeah, I think Andrew could make a run here, and I think that might be the only chance that we've got of keeping Christian in sight.
You do see it quite often, don't you? Particularly rear-wheel drive cars, the fact that they come off the line, the way the rear end sort of squirms, but the rear end always seems to ends up pointing towards the down the hill towards the pit wall, because that's where the elevation and the slope of the pit of the circuit is in terms of where it slants. So that can be crucial, and it's exactly the same here. But of course, that flatter patch of the tarmac may well be an advantage. Watch for Steve Arnell. He starts the 3rd car on the left, which is the multicolour, the predominantly yellow car with the kind of mosaic graphics. Watch for him for 5th on the grid. Tom McEwing's got some work to do for 6th. And also, I think we need to keep an eye on Chris Skillicorn, who'll be starting back in 14th on the grid. We want to try and redeem himself after he started on the front row in that first race earlier on. Christian Zeruta back on pole position, looking for his 5th win of the season out of 8 races. And Andrew Parker hasn't won a race yet, but whether I curse it or whether I bless him, could this be the evening to get race number 2? So let's see, the red lights come on. Race number 2 of caterhamracer.com season 5 at Brands Hatch Indy circuit's all set to get underway with Christian Zeruta on pole position. Away they go from the line. This time it was a better start for Parker than it was for Skillicorn for the front row of the grid. He might well start to put himself roughly alongside, which he does. Side by side for second, as David Rowe has got in front of Steve McMaster quickly enough, and he's under threat from Tom McEwing, who himself has been challenged by Steve Arnell. But immediately you can see Andy Parker's not hanging around, although he might have to deal with a very feisty David Rowe, who knows he has to make up places to stop Christian Zeruta getting away, which is exactly the one thing Andy Parker doesn't want Christian to do either. Oh, we're looking up the inside into Graham Bend. There's a bit of a contact. There's going to be 3 abreast on the exit. They're the wide there for Christian Zeruta, but Andy Parker tried to stick his nose up the inside, couldn't quite make it work. Parker now loses out to David Rowe, but the trains there already, the top 6 are all together, literally tucked underneath each other's roll cages. But more importantly, David Rowe is right there underneath his DPR teammate, looking to get him. A little tail slide there for Zeruta gets there. There's contact in the background. That's Guy Crawford involved. But here's the view from David Rowe. Darts to the outside of the line, but 2 championship contenders side by side. They almost bang wheels down towards Paddock Hill Bend. Rowe will try and get the undercut here. It's behind them. McMaster and Parker side by side. Tries to get the switch back on the exit. Can't work as Zeruta parks his car right on the apex, but Master was slightly out of shape. He's now under threat on the outside line from McEwing from 4th position. He tries to go around the outside. Parker's still in there as well. It's only that one, Chris, and I'm almost out of breath. It's incredible stuff. But the key thing was that I think all started where Parker tried to go up the inside, here a lap ago on the first lap at Graham Hill Bend, couldn't get it done, and the little touch that put Zeruta out of shape, that's what kicked this all off, and essentially kept David Rowe in touch enough, close enough in these early stages to keep Zeruta with him in the first opening couple of laps.
Yeah, you read it exactly the same way as I do. So yeah, that move was definitely what cost Andrew that. You've got to go for that gap. I think it was the door was open, so he put his car in there, but there was a slight touch. But he did what again we expect people to do, which is let the race continue. And now David Rowe really looks. Oh, Andrew Parker right out of shape. He got on the grass on the brakes there, and he's going to drift off even into the gravel. So he's going to lose momentum coming up the hill, and it looks like McEwing will also take advantage of him up the inside. He does, even though he's squirming, and Arnell might even follow him through. Once you're on the outside of the train at Brands Hatch, it's really difficult to put your car back in that line again. But yeah, David Rowe absolutely looking hooked on to Christian in this race, so maybe he's got a chance to keep up.
And this is what he needs after he finished back in 4th position. He really had to get his elbows out and just climb his way back up the order after his mistake. I'm sure if you talk to him, he'll recognise that it was his own mistake that he ran wide on the exit of Graham Hill Bend. He was the one that cost himself the place in the first place, and he was the one that then had to put the effort back in to push back up into 4th position. Yes, he was lucky with the instance that he had in front of him, but 4th place, as we said, was the maximum damage limitation that he could do to stop Christian's really pulling away too much in the advantage. Now he's right underneath him in his opening couple of laps. He needs to ensure that he stays with him. He keeps on applying the pressure, that he doesn't let Christian get away, because he knows exactly if that happens, he'll drop more and more points as we get towards the end of the season. Chris Skiddercall on the first proper flying lap was at the fastest lap of the race. And he started back in, 15th position. He's dropped back to 17th, so certainly got the pace, but it seems as though he got involved in something towards the back of the field, and he's now suffering for it. Steve Arnell goes around the outside of Andy Parker, who's now fighting the Paul Donkey. He finds himself in the middle, because looking up the inside of both of them is Richard Gallagher. 3 abreast into third. It shouldn't work, but somehow it kind of has. And also trying to get in there was Tom Willis as he backs out of it. James Fowler looks to go around the outside if he can of his fellow Academy graduate from 2019, which he almost does. Gallagher down to 7th place at the expense of Donkin. There's also battling just in front there as we see Steve Arnell and Andy Parker going at it for 5th position. Just about wherever you look at the moment, Chris, there are battles literally everywhere in the packet, in the front, in the middle and towards the rear.
Yeah, Arnell there was going side by side with Donkin for about 3 corners before we even cut to them. A little bit of contact there between Andrew Parker and queuing there. But yeah, McMaster's now in that middle ground and sort of will we see him make that bridge that gap? But you're right, there's battles absolutely everywhere in this race, and I can't believe they made it through that three wide. It's unbelievable. And they're still going.
There's essentially 2 parts to this race. There's the top 5 in front and literally everyone else behind. Although Steve Arnell has managed to break away slightly from Richard Gallagher. Up the inside of James Fowler goes Tom Willis once again, but Willis tries to hold on around the outside line. But Fowler holds onto the inside line to prevent Willis getting through again. So that's now changed on for 9th and 10th. We've seen Richard Gallagher in 7th position. He's down the inside of Paul Donkin, trying to get himself into the top 6. Donkin tried sticking out around the outside. Of course, Donkin, one of the drivers in the field who has raced one of these 420Rs in for real. Before that, he's raced all sorts, including I remember him back in the Honda VTEC Challenge as well. So he's done quite a lot of different racing, lots of different cars. He's done some Porsche racing as well, if I'm correct. So quite a bit in his locker in terms of experience. Paul Furner up here is having a scrap with James Fowler. Jamie P. Zennis also moving his way quietly but quite impressively through the middle of the pack as he goes through into 10th position. So he's now into the top 10. And Chris Skillicorn is still in 17th place, but we didn't quite catch what happened to him. But that's quite quick. But that was he's setting as pace as quick as the leaders. He knows he's got to try and make as much as he can. Now here comes David Rowe again with his best chance he's ever had down the outside line. Can he be brave enough to go round the outside into paddock? Yes, he will. He's going round the outside. He goes to the high, wide, and handsome line into paddock, down the hill and up Halewood Hill, under the bridge and in towards Druids now with 9.5 minutes to go. But Masters now in the mix there as he's starting to close in. Remember we talked about the fact that cars that battle have the cars around them either take advantage by pulling away in front of them or catching up behind them, and Christian Zaruta parks the car right on the apex, gets a small little tap in the rear from David Rowe just to remind him he's still there. Rowe now looks back to the inside line. They're going to be side by side into 30s. They are side by side. The 2 championship contenders, and Rowe's got his nose in front and he's through. Now I suspect possibly Zaruta might let him have that for a moment because he knows he can slot straight back in and get into the slipstream, but he's got to be careful also because he's now in a catch-22. He's got to keep one eye on David Rowe in front, Chris, but look behind him, Steve McMaster equally is racy. The 3 main championship contenders nose to tail here in a battle royale at the front of the field.
Yeah, brilliant. The right 3 cars are right at the right place, aren't they? So David Rowe, great move there, kind of 3 corners to manoeuvre his car into the right position there. And like you said, Christian had to concede, otherwise McMaster was going to be on them immediately, whereas he thought if I pull into line, then potentially I can protect myself from that. But he is now that sandwich filling, which is, like I say, an uncomfortable place to be. But we're just starting to see the edge of a little gap again there. I think these two, when they settle down and follow each other, they do have a slight pace advantage, which is to their advantage. But equally, it could be that David Rowe's thinking about backing Christian up into that. That's another tactic that Caterham drivers will often do, is making sure that the person behind you has much more to deal with than just you in front of them.
Lots of position changes going on. Richard Gallagher's gone up to 8th. I think John Lang's gone up to 11th. And James Fowler's gone up to 14th place at the expense of Jason Knight. So lots of position switching going on. And I think one thing which will also be fresh in the mind of Christian, of course, is last time out at Silverstone. Because those who watched remember what happened. Christian was in a position where he was able to close in and catch up to the back of David Rowe in the closing laps. And it was just on the last lap through Beckett and there's contact which put him down to 4th positions. Now there is a duel at the front. They've been switching positions, so David Rowe, Christian Zaruta, they're at it again, side by side. David Rowe just tries to move across to cover Zaruta, who has the inside line anyway, and again he parks the car on the apex. Rowe goes round the outside at Graham Hill Bend, which shouldn't be possible, but has the grip and the confidence to get round him. He's done it once more. So David Rowe, he is determined not to let this go, because he knows he has to finish ahead of Christian Zaruta as much as he can. He has to finish ahead of him to try and keep himself in the hunt for the championship fight as best as possible. He knows the drop scores are really going to become a factor here, so he has to score every crucial point that he can. Every single point matters here. And look behind him, because Steve McMaster, he's now been closed up by both Andy Parker and also Tom McEwing, side by side for the lead and for 3rd place, back into Paddock Hill Bend. And Christian Zaruta looks for the undercut, which he's going to put himself alongside, which he does. So Roman Zaruta, once again, they go back to wheel. They almost bang wheels again. Under brakes into Druids. Lock up from Parker as he gets 3rd position. Through past McMaster also goes Tom McEwing. And now look at Parker. He's not hanging around. He doesn't care that he's not in the championship fight. He's going for 3rd place. He wants this. He wants to be the nuisance between the 2 championship contenders. He really wants his first win. He senses the chance, Chris. And regardless if he's in the championship fight or not, he wants it, and he will get in between these 2 if that's what it takes.
There are plenty of races to go yet in this championship, Scott, and Andrew, by getting himself stuck in, may well become one of those championship contenders. So yeah, absolutely, he's being benefited from the scrapping going on to actually catch back up, and you can see the McEwing is also there, really sort of making a nuisance of himself. So these front 2 have really got to decide what they're going to do, but Christian looks like now he is willing to back David up, and again we saw some really good manoeuvring. Where is there a gap up the inside there for David to squeeze his car into? No, but he's sort of manoeuvred his gap. I think Christian's going to make that stick, because the outsider here is going to be the inside. We see Andrew Parker lost the rear end.
Yeah, Andy Parker lost the back end, so he's always the one that gets caught up in these situations. But look at Tom McEwing. Tom McEwing's having the race of his life so far. He's up to 3rd place, trying to squeeze up the inside of David Rowe. David's thinking, where on earth did you come from? I was so focused battling on Christian, I was having a look behind me, and Tom just crept up on him like out of nowhere. It's incredible stuff. As Richard Gallagher knows, also DNF from the race. Sadly, he's out with issues. So this top 4 is where it's all at. So Andy Parker's dropped back to 6th position. He's now battling with Steve Arnell, and he might well come into play here, because if he plays his cards right, he might well be in the mix here. Once again, side by side, down the outside line for David Rowe. Looks for that switch back on the exit through Paddock Hill Bend, and he tried to go up the inside. Now, he sensed that Christian was going to do that, sweeps the inside to the fence, so he goes to the outside line to get the undercut, possibly either on the exit of Druids or on the run into Graham Hill Bend. Either way, David saw exactly what Christian was going to do. He forced the dummy to the inside line to be offline, off the ideal line, to slow him up for the next couple of corners. And so this really isn't done yet. It's less than 5 minutes to go, but I think for these 2 it must feel like an eternity rather than 5 minutes left.
Yeah, if you think this is great racing watching online here, well, you believe we do it in real life as well, and come and watch us next weekend at Brands Hatch Indy, because that's what we will be doing, going around this very track in these very cars. Yeah, Christian absolutely using all his racing knowledge there to protect and block off David, the wide line with the protection to sweep up the inside, to stop the inside dive up to Druids, and you might see it again, David trying for that overlap, but Christian will just slow up extra slow in the middle of the corner, make sure that he's on the inside of Druids when he's coming up to the braking zone.
Yep, he's doing it again, forcing him to go defensive, which it'll be compromising Christian's line a bit, because he's taking the tighter but slower line through the corner. But at the same time, it's basically, as we talked about, it is backing David Rowe back into these 4 cars behind him, because they are having their own scrap, but even on the straights they're starting to work together in the slipstream. But once in the corner to start to hold each other up, that's when they come back into play, which is all the crucial thing. And Andy Parker's not necessarily out of it either. Yes, there's 3 3.75 minutes to go, but anything can happen. He's back in 6th, and he's just a fraction outside that half a second margin to get the slipstream in this Assetto Corsa sim. But someone who has got the half a second gap very much unnecessary is David Rowe, who once again, for the umpteenth time, goes to the outside line. Thought he'd let his lesson, wouldn't you? But he's going to go for it this time. He's diving around the outside once more. He's done it once before. He's going to try it again. But they will go parallel, side by side, under the bridge. Level pegging under brakes into Druids for once again. Trying to just nip at the rear end. He's really forcing Christian Zaruta to work hard here. And again, it brings McEwing and McMaster and Arnell and just about Andy Parker back into play. There are some portions of this circuit, it seems, where both Zaruta and Rowe are that little bit stronger than others. And it's corners like the slower ones, like Druids, and also even like through Clearways and McLaren, where the other cars start to close back up under braking. James Fowler's out of the race with 3 minutes to go. Sadly, 2 DNFs from this race so far. But now, once again, back on that pit straight. And once again, it's deja vu. Here we go again in the slipstream. David Rowe not as close as he has been before. He can't quite move out as soon as he has done previously, but again, forces Rooster to take that inside line. He goes back to the middle of the circuit to get the best possible line out of the corner if he can. But this time, I thought he might have a good run on the undercut, but once more, Zaruta, defensive, middle of the road. He really does like to get his elbows out. He's an incredibly great defensive driver. He's not someone who just doesn't push anyone off the circuit, doesn't leave them no racing room. He simply just puts the car exactly where he wants to put it and forces the other cars to pretty much drive around him. He really is putting a cracking effort up here because David Rowe's only been able to get around him once. Now Christian's got back through again, he's making it ever so difficult and forcing everyone else to back up behind him. Well, there was contact and up the inside went David Rowe. That was a bit cheeky. Now, I suspected possibly the series was trying to back him up into the cars behind, or simply Rowe didn't expect to be that close, and when he backed off into the corner, Rowe gave him a bit of a touch. But I'm pretty certain with 2 minutes to go, Chris, Christian won't appreciate that. He won't like that at all. He'll want to try and get him back immediately down towards paddock.
No, I know that these two will be giggling to themselves even that. Pretty much a NASCAR move, that wasn't it? Or maybe a touring car one. Not necessarily one we encourage. But David definitely made a little bit of contact, and that definitely was enough to push Christian out wide, and he just about protected himself from a McEwing, who's great there in third place and say, having a fantastic race. He's already got a couple of podiums this year, but it looks like he's going to maybe get another one.
Also, watch out for Andy Parker. He's got past Steve Arnell back into the top 5 again. So his next target will be Steve McMaster, who, if he gets caught up in this, with roughly about 2 laps to go here, there's a real chance that he might even sneak up and steal a position higher than that, possibly third, or dare even set a podium. It's far-fetched, I think, because it looks as though Tom McEwing is in the best position to get it, but he's now benefiting from the double toe of the cars in front, so he'll try and close in. And now the hunter becomes the hunted, because here comes Zaruta to try and put the attack on David Rowe, just as Rowe did to him a couple of laps ago. You can see from the overhead shot here just how close he was getting. He's pushing him up the hill. He's looking up the inside one way or the other. And now it's Rowe's turn to go to the middle of the road and go defensive. Here comes McEwing. He might spoil the party here in second place. If third place, if he can try and steal second and get his nose in front of either of them. Into Graham Hill bend again, and I suspect that we're possibly building up to a bit of a crescendo here, because I think we possibly could have a last lap move on its way.
Watch Graham Hill bend on the last lap. Christian looks like he was eyeing up a dive bomb there, so just keep an eye on that. If he doesn't get through on paddock, then there may be Graham Hill bend.
There's a lock-up from David Rowe, but watch for Tom McEwing. He'll have a double toe down the pit straight here. We're going to get one more time around the Indy circuit for tonight's action. It's only over by a long shot. 1.2 miles is left of this race, and Christian Zaruta is sniffing around the rear end, looking for a pass down the outside line. He looks to try and get the dummy, trying to force David Rowe to go back to the outside line to try and allow Christian Zaruta to sweep past on the inside into the apex of the corner. Can't quite do it. Now he goes back to the outside. He's level pegging again. He's looked around the outside line at Druids. Rowe might show him the edge of the road, which he does, and holds on for the time being. And McEwing's going to try and have a look up the inside of second place. McEwing, he thought about it, but he's not going to quite make it happen just yet. Now the run off the all-important corner for Graham Hill bend. A little bit of a wobble there for Rowe, but I think he might just hold on. Again, middle of the road, racing line, into the left-hander at Surtees. There was literally corners left in this race. Christian makes a dive up the inside into the right-hander at Clearways. He's going for it. Rowe tries to shut the door there side by side on the exit. They bang wheels, and Christian Zaruta's got through, and Tom McEwing might get second place as well. It was a bit of a risky move. There might be conversations afterwards, but on a sprint to the line, Christian Zaruta, incredibly, will take race 2, and in a charge to the checkered flag, Tom McEwing does beat David Rowe to the finish. Second place for McEwing, third for Rowe, then it's McMaster, Parker and Arnell in one of the most thrilling finishes we've had to a caterhamracer.com race we've had since we began. Brilliant stuff. Fifth place for Andy Parker, 6th for Steve Arnell, then it's Donkin Willis, Lang Crawford rounding out the top 10, then Fernhoff Curtis, Knight, Skillercorn back up to 14th, Kuma Peters Ennis, and Fowler and Gallagher are the retirements, as also was Jamie Peters Ennis back in 16th. Stick a fork in me, Chris. I'm done.
Yeah,
what a finish that was.
That was absolutely superb. Yes, I think given David gave him the bump a couple of corners before, maybe that was kind of a little bit of payback. But it was an opportunistic mood. He definitely had the car up the inside there, and so yeah. We'll see what there comes out of it, but that was whatever comes out of it, that was brilliant to watch, and well done everyone. That was superb action.
Bit of tit for tat, we think. Okay, we'll let them talk about it in the race after, possibly in the post-race interviews if we get them back together. But we'll see what we can conjure up. So, in one of the most thrilling races that we've had, or thrilling conclusions that we've had to a race in caterhamracer.com since we started, Christian Zaruta does literally steal the win from David Rowe under his nose at the final corners, and he wins by 0.2 of a second. But of course, if you show them that result, that ain't the end of the story by a long shot. Tom McEwing with an incredible opportunistic move up the inside to steal second place on the last corner. from David Rowe on the sprint to the flag. David Rowe might feel a little bit hard done by with third, but he'll know at least it's a strong podium to keep Christian Zeruta in touch, at least with the last couple of rounds coming up in the second half of the season. And it's Steve McMaster fourth. Andy Parker won his battle with Steve Arnell to finish in fifth position ahead of Steve in sixth. Paul Donkin was seventh. Tom Willis eighth. John Lang was ninth, and Guy Crawford rounds out the top 10. 11th place goes to Paul Fernhoff from Alan Curtis in 12th position. Jason Knight in 13th. Chris Skillicorn couldn't quite make the impact he wanted to. Had an issue on the first lap, dropped him back to 17th, and he managed to climb his way back up. Well, as a virtue of, I think, Michael Coomber, who pitted after he had some early issues, and then also the retirements around him, he finishes 14th. Michael Coomber does start the race and finish in 15th, and we sadly lost towards the end. Jamie Peters-Ennis, James Fowler, and Richard Gallagher. Whoa, that was an evenings racing, that's for sure. That was an incredible second race, in particular, to cap things off. And I think it just shows that, given they've had a month and a bit away from this one, they're just as hungry as they ever were, if not more. And I think with the battles that we had and the great side-by-side action that we had between Rowe and Zeruta in that second race, I think this battle is going to go all the way to the season finale at the last rounds at Cadwell Park. That's going to be quite special, I think, by the time we get to those last couple of rounds, where that's a circuit where overtaking is not impossible, but it's incredibly difficult and incredibly tough to make. And so I think we could be in for quite a climax this season as the second half of the season unfolds. But there's still quite a few races to go, and it could all change at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, you look at the results sheet and you've got Christian Zeruta pole. Christian Zeruta wins in both races, but doesn't tell the whole story, does it? In that first race, he did look quite dominant, but in that second one, absolutely nose to tail. So as soon as David Rowe was able just to race him, that absolutely stuck at it, and it was really good, wasn't it? I mean, they're absolutely side by side for much of the race, and it wasn't just them either. It was the whole pack behind them were also, fully alongside each other for most of that race. And yeah, we saw some retirements. We do have damage, so they do have to manage that, and maybe some of those contacts just gave a little bit more of a nudge than others, but absolutely brilliant to watch, and I should be watching back that stream. It was epic stuff.
Yeah, sensational stuff. And of course we have to talk about as well Tom McEwing, again stealing that second place from David Rowe. Not only was it cheeky, of course, of Christian to have the tiny little bump and run there to make his way through into the lead on the last corner, but for Tom McEwing, ever the opportunist to sneak up the inside and say, right, if you're going to leave the door open, David, whilst he was a little bit stunned by that, he absolutely crept through and stole it under his nose. That was a brilliant chance to get up the inside, and he did hold off David in a straight line. So brilliant effort from Tom, and if that's what we've got to come possibly in next year's Academy, I say bring it on. Well,
maybe let's just see if we can get Tom into the commentary box. I'm not sure whether he's got audio, but we'll give it a go. Tom, have you got us in the commentary box?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely, got you. So what an end to that last race there. You you're hanging on in there for the whole thing, but just opened up for you on that last corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Following Dave and Christian, you always felt there's a good chance there's going to be some contact or an opportunity. So I was just trying to keep it together and be there if there was a gap.
Yeah, and absolutely, that's exactly what you want to do. And we were just saying you're kind of building up to your own motor racing career. Maybe is it starting next year?
Yeah, just confirmed that now actually, the last week or so. So we'll be taking part of next year's Academy. Yeah.
Brilliant. So we'll keep abreast of that story for you next year as well. Then, so congratulations tonight, great result, and good for your championship.
Cheers, and thanks for being on the stream and the races, much appreciated.
Alrighty, so yeah, great to hear from McEwing. Like I say, someone willing to convert from sim world into real world racing. I think the other two sort of podiums we've had tonight have been Steve McMaster. So let's grab Steve in there. Have you got us in the commentary box, Steve?
Hello. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, quite an eventful race for you. Both races. Just got your podium in that first race, and the second one just missing out there.
Missing out, but grandstand seat.
Yeah, what a view!
What was an incredible race, right? That was. I hope it comes through on the stream as well as it did from about a second behind it.
Scott would normally be talking now, but he's out of breath and recovering his voice.
He's gone off for a beer and a cigarette.
I've got just about a little bit left, but now that was an incredible finish for that second race. Absolutely breathtaking stuff.
I mean, to be honest with you, it was one of those races where I'm thinking, where's Tom McEwing? Because I'm equal with him on points in the championship, so I could go piling up into the guys in front and make a horrible mistake. So it was more of a championship thing than anything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, overall, like you say, it's a good for your championship. So another couple of solid results, and that might count for the end of the year.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. We'll get back into, I think it's the Academy next, so my nemesis, but we'll do my best in it as much as I can.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Steve. Hopefully we've got Andrew now in the commentary box.
Cheers, chaps. Take care.
Hey, Cheesy.
Yeah, so your first race, absolutely brilliant, storming second place. And the second race, got a little bit bumped and bored around.
Yeah, I managed to go from 5th to 2nd in the first race and from 2nd to 5th in the second race.
Congratulations.
So ended up net neutral, I think.
But still, I would say they're quite, given the events of that race, very strong recoveries both times to actually get those results. So that must give you some confidence and some really good racing, like you say, in that first race to get to that second.
Yeah, the racing was really good. The second race, I kind of was a spectator, and that was equally as much fun. I think coming into this as unprepared as I was, I'm really impressed and happy with the result I've got.
Yeah, so congratulations and well done on the sheer number of laps and the perseverance. So we'll see you at the next one.
All right, cheers, guys. Thank you.
Let's get David Rowe in here. David, you're in the commentary box.
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, great. How are you? Have you calmed down now? That must have been a very exciting night's racing for you.
Yeah, it was really good. I was a little bit upset with Christian at the last corner, but to be honest, it was that emotion was overridden by actually the fact that the race was excellent. It was really, really good fun.
We saw a little bump on Christian maybe in a similar place a few laps before that. We were wondering whether there was a little bit of tit for tat there.
Yeah, I think he brake checked me, and I couldn't go anywhere.
But I mean, overall though, from the stream's perspective, it did look like an epic race and pretty full on from start to finish. You must be quite tired, given that your sim that you're racing in does give you a good workout.
Yeah, it does. I am sweating buckets. But me and Christian were just saying, actually, that felt like a real Caterham race at Brands Hatch. It was really good fun, and yeah, pretty tense all the way through.
Still got to have a sort of good end to the year because Christian's on a roll at the moment, so we do need to get him off that roll, don't we?
Yeah, he's found his form, hasn't he? He's got it. He's got just that little bit on me, so I was kind of hanging in there, and I tried to outrace him. But as you know, he's a wily fox, isn't he?
He certainly is. Anyway, we will see you at the weekend under the awning, and thanks very much for your awesome racing tonight.
Wicked. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
And let's bring in Christian as well. Have you got us in the commentary box?
Yes.
Excellent racing tonight. I thought it was. I sort of mentioned on the commentary, and David just mentioned it then in the commentary box, that it really did look like proper Caterham racing. All the same tactics that we see in real life. I saw you employing, the cut pack protections, the slight parking in the middle of the corners, all those kind of things. And your experience on track must have helped tonight.
Yeah, I think that was about as close as we've ever had in terms of comparing to real life racing. That was, I'm sweating.
Yeah,
as much as it would be in real life, I'm absolutely sweating.
I mean, I guess it's worth pointing out as well that even though it's a simulator and it's different from racing, you still feel the same emotion, right?
Yeah, I'd say you've got to concentrate more because you don't have the feel of the car underneath you. You've only got kind of the feedback from the steering wheel, so you've almost got to concentrate more not to mess it up compared to real life. I think it's a little bit, I don't know, consistency is probably just as the same as it is in real life, but just trying to keep it on the track, I think, in the sim is probably a little bit harder.
Yeah, and we saw in that first race, obviously the toe doesn't play as much of a role in this sim, and that's one of the reasons you could pull to that 6-second lead, but you must have been pretty happy with the start and in fact the end of this evening. And we did see a little bit of we'll call it an opportunistic move, but we also saw David give you a little nudge a little while earlier.
He did. I actually thought going into the last corner there, I thought Dave missed a gear change. So I just thought I'd sneak it past him. I honestly thought he'd missed a gear change again. So I don't think, did he? I'm not sure.
He didn't say he did.
He didn't say. Okay, sorry. He left the door wide open, so
we'll watch the feedback. It's certainly it's nothing we haven't again seen in real life, is it? So It's certainly an opportunistic move. But congratulations, another 2 wins to your championship, bringing you to 4 total wins, I believe, which is
I think so.
Quite a nice place to be.
It is, yes.
In fact,
Indeed.
no, it's 5 wins you've got. I've got to apologise.
Long may it continue.
Indeed. We will see you at the next one, and congratulations.
Cheers, guys.
There you go, Scott. A great evenings of racing.
Yeah, and they do seem quite civilised, don't they, between each other? They might well be teammates, but I guess they can be civil whilst also battling for a championship, I suppose. Which
They love it.
I guess it's more civil than could be in a certain battle between a certain British driver and a certain Dutch driver in some cases. But, which is certainly saying something given how competitive those two are and how mischievous those two can be as well, both on and off track as well. So, but yeah, no, I agree. Excellent evenings racing once again. Good to get things back in motion because, as I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, of course, it was over a month since we'd had our last rounds at the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, and of course, going forward, just a reminder of what we've got coming up for the rest of the season. So, we've now pretty much officially hit the halfway point. We've now got 8 races down, another 6 still to go. We are in the second half of the season where it starts to get more and more crucial. There's more racing right at the end of the month because we've got our next rounds coming up. Croft in the Yorkshire. It's one of my favourite circuits in the UK. It's brilliant, fast, flat circuit. Lots of high-speed corners, brilliant sections where you can get some really daring overtakes done. Then Snetterton 300, long straights, the longer corners, the technical infield section, and of course it's perfect slipstreaming and overtaking fodder for plenty of the occasions that will be in effect. And then as I mentioned, things finish up on the 12th of October, once again in the 420R cars, because our next couple of rounds are going to be back in the Caterham Academy cars. We've had our pair of weekends in the 420R. We're going to put that to rest for a couple of months until the season finale. But it's back to the Academy cars. And as we've talked about in the past, Chris, sometimes one car can suit one driver and another car can suit another. So those who might struggle in the 420R but prefer the Academy car might find themselves back on form again when we go back towards Croft in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, we've definitely seen the twos and fro's ebbs and whatever of people's skill and preference on the cars, and even track by track you get tracks that suit drivers more than others, and people just hook it up, or maybe they've just had a bit more time to practice than other people. In a relative term, we often see, like say, Tom Willis often qualifies at the back, and that's often because he hasn't done the practice, but once he gets into the actual racing he zooms forward. But yep, Croft, a favourite driving place of mine as well. It's nice to get up there. It's a long old trip from South Coast where I am, but always worth the effort. Yeah,
and speaking of effort and taking trips to race circuits, as we mentioned, we are back in action again for real life this weekend. Caterham Motorsport drops in for its home rounds, shall we say, because of course Caterham is based in Kent, where its motorsport division is. The motorsport part of it is based in Dartford. We've also got the base in Gatwick, which isn't too far away either. But it is pretty much their home venue, which is, of course, Brands Hatch on the Indy circuit this weekend. We've got all 5 Caterham divisions out from both the Academy Championships all the way up to the Raid Championship, which Mr. Hutchison competes in himself, which is the Caterham 7 Championship UK. Quick note on how you feeling about this weekend. I know you were talking about that, just trying to get yourself into the motion in terms of getting yourself G'd up for this weekend. And you feel like you had to do a little bit more to try and get yourself in the zone. Are you sort of doing all right across this week to get yourself ready?
Just a lot of learning, Scott, this year. So, that's brand new car, brand new effect, and you take steps forward and you take steps back. And I'm just hoping this weekend, let's take a step forward. I do like Brands Hatch. I've won here before a few times, so I certainly know the track and just going to try and get dialed in early. And at the moment, it's looking like changeable weather. I mean, say, if any of you are watching this stream or got people locally, we'd love to see you on the banks cheering on. Like I say, we often put on exactly the same kind of show that you've seen tonight.
Yeah, it's if you do want to watch, of course, with all the restrictions lifting around the England in particular. If you are watching, thinking, quite as Chris said, I quite like look at that. If there's some real life version of that, I want come on, have a go and watch. We do both urge you, do go and get yourself some tickets if you can, because Caterham racing in person, you thought that was good on the sim. It is just as good in real life as well, and it's particularly around the speed bowl that is the Brands Hatch Indy circuit is going to be immense. That's where I would normally be in the commentary tower, of course, at the top, but instead I think I might well be at the top of the building opposite, which is the Bradman Stewart building, which is where we're going to have the live stream, because we said we have got the live stream this weekend on the Caterham Facebook and YouTube pages, as well as the BROTC YouTube pages. All 5 of the Caterhams will be live. All the races from all the Caterham Championships will be live streamed, as well as all the supporting action from Formula Fords, from the Zero Prototype Cup, from the Track Attack Race Club, and from the Classic and Modern Motorsport Club's Southern Division, which has got some pretty tasty cars in the mix, including, of all cars, Chris, an ex-V8 supercar Holden Commodore, which is going to be on the entry list.
I should look forward to listening to that go around it.
Absolutely. You can't be a bit of 5 litre Aussie V8. Absolutely. So yeah, if you can make it, do be sure to get down track. So I would love to have you. If you can't, there is the live stream to watch on Facebook and YouTube. And of course, we'll of course be in action once again for more action very soon. And of course, we have to say a big thank you to our sponsors before we finish off, which is saying that the caterhamracer.com Season 5 Championship is in association with Just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights and accessories for the Caterham 7 by the Design and Display Structures. Immerse yourself in worlds beyond with bespoke projection screens, and by DPR Motorsport, your competitive advantage. And we're also supported by Darren, Burke, Performance Driver Coach. And just before we sign off, to say also as well, a massive thank you once again to all the marshals, to everything that they do. They put on a fantastic effort to make sure we can go racing. Once again, our thoughts go to the tragic loss of the marshal that we had back at Brands Hatch. But of course, I'm sure this weekend and every other weekend we'll honour them and all the marshals around the country by going the same thing we do every weekend, which is go racing. So please take care. And of course, we'll be back with more action next time at Croft in a few weeks' time. But until then, enjoy the racing if you're watching this weekend. And of course, thank you to all our brave marshals for all the effort they do. Bye for now.
Speak soon.